What if the deepest healing for trauma isn't about talking, but about listening, really listening to the body? Today, we're going to dive into this really interesting document written for mental health professionals that tries to build a bridge between ancient Vedic wisdom and modern trauma care. It suggests a way to get to trauma right where it's stored, at a level that words just can't always reach.
And that's really the core question here, isn't it? We're so used to thinking of healing as this narrative thing. We talk it out, we reframe it, we figure out the story. But what do you do about the wounds that don't really have a story? The ones that are just lodged deep in our nervous system, in those quiet, pre-verbal parts of who we are.
And that leads us to a pretty challenging idea from our source material. Now look, it totally acknowledges the incredible power of talk therapy, but it also asks a tough question. What are its limits? The document suggests that sometimes just talking isn't enough to reach the deepest imprints that trauma leaves on the body itself.
And this is where we see a huge reframing of what trauma even is. It's not just a bad memory you have. The source presents it as a physical imprint, like a persistent echo that's been stamped onto the nervous system. And then it goes a step further, talking about an imprint on our energy field. You can think of this as the body's overall state of harmony or maybe disharmony, a kind of vibrational signature that's there even when your thinking mind is completely quiet.
So, okay, if trauma can exist in places beyond words, how in the world do you access it? Well, this is where the document turns to some really ancient Vedic knowledge for a potential answer.
The method is called Hiranyagarbha, and the name itself is pretty amazing. It translates to golden womb or golden sphere. And that imagery really points to the core idea, creating this safe, generative healing space right inside the body. It's described as an ancient energetic method that's designed to work directly on those deep, nonverbal imprints.
Now, this next part is super important, and the document makes this crystal clear. This is not about adopting a new belief system. You don't have to believe in anything for it to work. It's presented purely as an experiential process, something that is felt and resolved in the body, completely bypassing the analytical mind.
All right, so if it's an experience, what's actually happening? What does it do? Well, the core principle is surprisingly gentle, and it's all about this idea of healing without having to relive all the pain.
So the central idea here is the creation of what the source calls a coherent field. Okay, imagine a chaotic orchestra where every single instrument is out of tune, it's just noise. A coherent field is like a conductor stepping in and playing one single, clear, perfect note. Suddenly, all the other instruments have a reference point, and they can start to tune themselves back to that note. The theory is, in this state of internal harmony and safety, the body's own intelligence can finally release the dissonance of trauma it's been holding on to.
And this, right here, is a huge deal. For anyone who's afraid that healing means having to go back and relive the worst moments of their life, this approach offers a totally different path. The entire goal is to let the release happen without forcing a replay of the trauma, which is so important because it helps avoid that very real risk of re-traumatization.
Now let's be really clear, this isn't being presented as a replacement for conventional therapy. Not at all. It's more like a potential bridge. The document we're looking at is aimed right at clinicians, positioning this method as a complementary tool to add to their existing toolkit.
So if you're a professional, what's the point? Well, it's not about replacing what already works. It's about complementing powerful tools like EMDR and CBT, maybe especially for clients who just feel stuck. The main focus is on regulating the nervous system, which is the foundation of all trauma work, and giving both the client and the therapist a new way to think about trauma, not as this fixed story, but as a resolvable, energetic imprint.
This gives us a really clear side-by-side. On the one hand, you've got the super important work on memory and narrative, reprocessing the story. And on the other, you have this approach, which kind of bypasses the story to work directly on that energetic imprint, aiming to restore a foundational sense of balance in the body. You can think of it this way. One works top-down, the other works bottom-up.
So, at the end of the day, this isn't a battle between ancient versus modern. The whole vision that's presented in the source material is really one of powerful integration. I love the metaphor they use here, that this kind of approach completes the circle. If psychology tends to work from the top down, from our thoughts and stories, this method aims to work from the bottom up. It goes right to where the trauma first began, in the nervous system, and works to restore coherence there. Together, they can create a much more holistic path to healing. And this quote really just distills it all down to something so simple but so profound. When the nervous system feels held, the psyche can release.
It's the perfect summary of that bottom-up approach. You create that deep sense of safety and regulation in the body first, and from that foundation of feeling held, the mind finally gets the memo that it's safe enough to let go. And it all comes back to this one idea. The goal isn't to fight the trauma or analyze it away. It's simply to restore the system's natural state of harmony. The promise here is that healing isn't something you have to force. It's just what naturally follows when that coherence returns.
So where does that leave us? Well, it brings up this really fascinating question for the future of mental health. As we learn more and more about the deep connections between our minds and our bodies, maybe the most effective path forward isn't about choosing one over the other, but about skillfully blending the incredible precision of modern science with the profound perspective of ancient wisdom.